right, there we go, there we go. Welcome. Good morning, everyone, to Friday Morning Fuel. I am Coach Matt, your program manager for your Exos team. Today is February, still the beginning of February. All month, we're going to be talking about heart health. So this morning, what better way to talk about heart health in terms of how to fuel a better heart health with some food, all right? So this Friday morning, we're going to be talking about what to check in for your heart health with your nutrition, and what does heart healthy mean, and how can we improve that throughout our daily meals, monthly meals, our meal prep, our grocery shopping. What do we check out for? And we'll kind of see where this all goes. All right. It's been a month since I've been up here, so we'll kind of see how this all goes. Very first thing, I'm going to get started. Before I even tell you what we're doing, we're just going to go ahead and get stuff started, and then we'll kind of talk as we go. I am going to be making a version of a heart-healthy burger. And you're like, oh, I don't want a healthy burger. It's still a burger. It's going to be very, very tasty. So what I'm going to do is we're going to start actually with pickling some red onions. So if you know me, usually on these shows we have a good bit of stuff prepped for you already. But today I decided we're going to start completely from scratch. The only thing I've done is gather the ingredients, which is typically what I would recommend you do first anyway. So what I'm doing is a very quick pickle. We're doing equal parts water and white vinegar. I lost my lid. There we go. We're going to throw in a bit of salt. And we're going to kind of just let this simmer away for, I don't know, until it starts simmering, until it starts bubbling a little bit. Usually pickling calls for sugar. I'm going to use we talked about this a long time ago, using honey or maple syrup instead of sugar. So we're just going to put about a half tablespoon of that in there. So I'm going to go ahead and let that prep. Remember, I try to meet you halfway on this. With all of our cooking, we try to talk about what is healthy, what is practical, and how can we kind of combine those two into something that makes sense, that's a little bit easier to grasp and to utilize in your day-to-day. So remember, cooking tip, kind of not necessarily number one, but prime cooking tip is go ahead and get stuff started and let that cook, simmer, bake, whatever it needs to do while you're prepping something else. Time constraints are usually a huge part of everybody's kitchen setup, so we're going to try to be as effective as possible. So letting stuff get going. To kind of finish the other part of that, we're going to need some red onions, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to chop up some red onions in slices, slivers, whatever you'd like. And depending on what kind of container you have is going to depend on how much liquid you have, right? Obviously, we're not going to do like 2 cups of liquid if I only have a cup and a half of a jar. So we're going to get an onion going here and chop this up before we start pickling. So why red onion? Why pickle some red onions for our heart healthy burger? What does that do? Mostly for balance. So I relatively recently have discovered red onions and how great they go with pretty much everything. You can put these on burgers, sandwiches, on eggs. You can put this in like a Buddha bowl. You can put these, wherever you want to. The thing about red onions, like pickled red onions, especially if you make them yourself, they don't have a bunch of preservatives in it. All right, super, super quick to make. You'll see this will get going in less than 10 minutes. And then the only thing that you really have to do is kind of wait for them to pickle. I'll usually let them sit for 20 minutes, 30 minutes or so. That's going to get really hot. So basically, as long as it takes for this to cool off, and then I'll use them right away. But they will last keep in the fridge for up to 2 weeks or so, and then they start getting a bit too rancid for my personal taste. So you can make that adjustment. But so fun thing about the acidity in these pickled red onions, or if you want to use pickles or anything else, acid is actually what causes your mouth to water. So that's a really important part of kind of, I don't want to say like a balanced meal in terms of nutrition, but a balance in terms of flavor profiling. So, kind of your triangle of flavor is salty, sweet, and acidic, right? So we try to kind of get all three of those things in pretty much anything that you want to make tasty. So we've got our salty. We'll have plenty of salt in this, of course. We've got our sweet with a little bit of honey, and we've got our acidity with the vinegar, right? So that kind of makes that good balance, and it's going to be a great part for our meal. So we're just going to kind of set that aside, and we're going to move on to the star of the show, our meat. So when we talk about heart health, what is heart health? What does that mean? So kind of in layman's terms, we want to not overwork your heart. So a big problem with Americans and the population of the world in general these days is that, high blood pressure, hypertension, we've got heart disease, all kinds of things like that. That's typically caused by the diet and the exercise, right? The two big things. So we'll go ahead and tell you now that, you can eat perfectly, but if we're not moving, then we're only playing half the game, okay? So part of a balanced meal is balanced exercise as well. We can talk about that plenty more later on, but today we're going to talk about certainly the food aspect of this. So when we talk about heart health, we talk about with your heart is how much your heart is working. So we know that your heart pumps blood through your arteries and takes it back into your veins, right? So the hypertension or high blood pressure, in case you know, is the tubes of which your blood flows, right? Your veins, your arteries, all that. The more they constrict, right, the harder it is to push blood through that, right? So high pressure in that tube, right? The more dilated your tubes are, the easier it is for that blood to flow. So kind of two different things. We can either talk about the viscosity of the blood, making it thinner or making it thicker. All right, or we can talk about the size of the vessels. Both of those things will impact your blood pressure. All right, so what kind of makes those arteries smaller? So usually plaque buildup, I think we're all aware of most of that, is the more plaque builds up on the inside of those arteries, the smaller that diameter that blood has to push through. Farther down the line, the harder that heart has to pump to push that blood through. Okay, the more pressure, the more energy that heart is. But hey, you may ask, like, oh, if I exercise, right, my heart is working really hard, right? Is that problematic? No. The kind of the difference there is that high blood pressure, if your heart is working overtime just to pump blood throughout the day, right, that heart is working at that high rate all of the time, all right? Where exercise is a very kind of structured, smaller block of time that is a very purposeful stimulus to which we then adapt to. If we were just constantly stressed, overworking, we're going to crash, right? Everybody knows that. So the kind of finding that balance of what we can regulate and what we can, that little formula we like to use, right? Work plus rest equals success, right? If you're just working all the time, you're not going to have a whole lot of success. So think about that. Exercise is your work. When you're not exercising, that's your rest. And both of those kind of put together, your recovery is your success. So that's kind of difference. We want that heart to work when we want it to. We're going to try not to overwork it all the rest of the time. So it's going to bring it back to how do we keep plaque out of those walls of our arteries. It's going to be the food that we eat, right? So the biggest thing, I know a lot of people, I don't want to over-explain this too much, but cholesterol is kind of a buzzword, as well as saturated fat. So cholesterol is actually made of saturated fat. So it's not necessarily the cholesterol part of that. I know people have a big aversion to eggs when they talk about their heart health, talk about your cholesterol levels and everything like that. I want to say eggs are not going to be the culprit here. We have a whole Friday Morning Fuel, Coach Chris did a while back, all about eggs and cholesterol. If you haven't seen that, go check it out on our YouTube channel. But it's going to be the saturated fats part of this, okay? So the biggest thing about saturated fat, the easiest way to think about this is the saturated fat is if that fat is a solid at room temperature, okay? That's going to be pretty much the thing. So we have two examples here. We've got coconut oil and we've got olive oil. So if you can see, olive oil is a liquid, right? Coconut oil, this is solid, right? So, and you can also check the nutrition label. Saturated fat, 13 grams out of 14 grams of total fat. So this is highly saturated, okay? Whereas your olive oil, only has 2 grams of saturated fat compared to 14 total fat. Okay. I bring these up because fat is also a big problem for a lot of people. I know most of us here are a little bit older. The nutritional science has changed over the last 50 years. So we kind of want to give a little bit of conversation to the stuff that you may have grown up with and kind of where the science is now. I'll tell you right now, fat is not the enemy. All right, an unbalanced diet is the enemy. Fun fact: so after World War II, food was a little bit more scarce, right? So this is bubbling away. I'm going to pour this in here in just a second. Food was really scarce, so the U.S. government wanted a way to get cheap food to our Americans, to something that's cheap, calorically dense, to build bigger people, stronger people, which would then make bigger and stronger soldiers should we ever get into another world war, right? So this is why butter was a huge kind of push from the U.S. government in the 50s. This is all about making bigger and stronger citizens, right? So they could either themselves fight in a future war or make big, strong children to fight in a future war. So this is kind of a warped, everybody knows our lovely food pyramid, right? So that is not anything about nutritional health. That is all, I want to get super political, but it was kind of pushing the foods that were cheaper and more calorically dense onto our citizens to do those things that we talked about. So if you've grown up where butter is kind of your main thing, that might be the reason why. Yes, it does taste good, but obviously it is very high in saturated fat because it is a solid at room temperature. All right, so this has been simmering a minute. I'm going to take this off the heat, and we're just going to pour this into our jar right here. Boom. All right, probably could use a little bit more, but it'll be all right. So we're just going to kind of let that sit for a little while, and we're going to move on to our burgers. So I'm going to go ahead and preheat my pan because we're going to get that nice and steaming hot. I know we got away from this topic a little bit, but our main event today, we're going to do some ground elk. What does that mean? It's not beef. So I'm going to give you a few different options. I'm not saying at this point you're probably like, oh my gosh, I can't afford elk. And I'll let you know, this was $1 more than the ground beef. So it's not that bad. I'm going to dig in there with my hands a little bit. I'm going to wash these first. So we'll circle back to what I was talking about just a minute ago. But the thing with our meat choices, so we kind of talked about cholesterol, we talked about saturated fats. So typically animal fats, your parents always told you don't pour the fat or the grease down the drain, right? And what is the reason? Because it solidifies and it clogs the drain, right? So let's think about putting that. I'm just going to put some salt, pepper, a little bit of ginger, and parsley in here. So if you don't want to pour that fat, that grease down the drain, tell me, why would you want to put that into your body? Gross exaggeration on that, of course, but that was a lot. Don't put that much. We're making it work. We'll be all right. So yeah, we want to kind of avoid putting all that kind of fat in our body. A little bit is fine. It definitely helps with some of that good cholesterol we kind of referred to a little bit ago. But we do want to limit it, right? So the thing with elk here that we're using, I just want to kind of show you different examples of alternatives. So beef is usually the go-to, which is fine. Kind of the general rule of thumb here is that the leaner, the better, right? The leaner the meat, the less saturated fat it's going to be, the less problematic it's going to be in terms of that saturated fat and that cholesterol. So I chose elk here just because we can use, or I'll show you just a variety of things. Bison is usually pretty lean. Obviously, turkey is a less expensive alternative. And I got the elk because I know turkey, some people have an issue with the taste of turkey. And surprisingly enough, the issue is because there's not a lot of fat in it, right? Fat is very, very flavorful. And that's kind of the problem with turkey burgers that people may not necessarily enjoy. It's just because of the flavor of it. There's not a lot of fat in it. So what I would recommend is kind of if you're venturing down this road, if you use a lot of beef, why don't you like half and half it? Use the ground beef that you normally use, about half a portion, and then half of that being ground turkey. Kind of mix that together, make a little mince of it, and then you've got a bit leaner of an option. This elk right here is 91% lean. This hand has not touched the beef or the meat. This hand has. So this elk is 91% lean. Bison is a great option as well. Also, when I was getting this, there was ground beef that was up to 96% lean. So if you still want that beef flavoring, right, great option to go. Of course, this is going to be a little bit more expensive. But the thing is, like, hospital bills are also expensive. So if you want to pay for, the potential issues down the road, or you pay a little bit every time you go to the grocery store, and you live a lot longer, a little bit healthier, right? Good option, I think. A little biased over here, but just trying to help you out. So we're going to form these into some nice, good patties. Fun thing about meat, you don't want to overwork it. All right, so the more you kind of like pack it together and smash it, the firmer it's going to be. Do want to work it a little bit so it doesn't like fall apart. This is not fancy like Wagyu beef that you want it to like melt and fall apart. This is just a little bit of regular meat. Cool. So kind of again, quick options there. Check out your other meat options, not always just beef. If turkey is an option there, we can always go half and half or kind of mix that ratio as you go. I'm going to let that heat up a little bit longer. And usually I get 4 burgers out of a pound. So we'll shoot for that. Good quarter pound of burgers. And just remember, since this is a little bit leaner, they will not shrink as much as a kind of traditional burger. I think somewhere around that like 80-20 ratio is quote unquote the ideal burger ratio for fats and everything. So if you're used to making your burgers a certain size, just remember that with it a little bit leaner, they're not going to shrink as much. They're going to hold that size a bit more. So we're going to make these. We'll get these fried, and then we'll kind of talk about toppings and everything. So hopefully you got a little bit of a takeaway in terms of what kind of beef that we should be using, or not, I'm excuse, what kind of beef, what kind of meat is other options for you. All right. So I am going to put a little bit of oil on the pan just to help save my pan a little bit. Typically with fattier meats, you kind of just pop it right on, and the oil the fat from the meat will kind of grease it for you. But we're just going to put a little bit to help it out. Also to kind of check on what our how hot our pan is, which is probably hot enough. So we're going to pop these on. You may have your own method for burgers. For me, it's about 6 minutes aside. Now it gets a little bit loud, so sorry about that. I'm going to get one more wash here. I've gone back and forth a lot with the whole camp of, let's do, one burger flip. Some are like, you can do as many as you want to. For me, it's just easier, less work if we only flip it one time. So we're just going to let it cook for about 6 minutes. We'll flip it over. Should be a little bit of charring on one side. Another 6 minutes, and then we should be good to go. Also, it kind of helps us stay on schedule. While that's going, I'm going to toast my buns real quick. So usually this would be on a grill, and you just kind of pop it on there for a few minutes. But I'm going to do them in the oven here. I'm going to do this a little bit differently. I'm going to put it in the oven. I usually set the oven for about 350. I'm just going to make one here. I'll talk about bread in a second. And we're just going to pop this in there right on the rack, save some dishes. And usually, as long as that takes to preheat, it's kind of a good amount of time for me to let that toast. I know people like it a little bit kind of charred on the bottom. I prefer just like a bit crispy on the outside and kind of soft in the middle. That's what I'm going for. Obviously, make whatever adjustments you need to. So we'll take this time to kind of talk about bread real quick. So I'm not saying that this is the bread that you should buy. What I'm saying is that in terms of heart health and health in general, you know, we talk about bread, grains, you know, gluten all the time. So this is a big problem area for a lot of people, and for good reason, right? Grain is really, really cheap. It's easy to produce. It's calorically dense, right? It fills you up. But we have to kind of pay attention to serving sizes. So with this bread, this is something that I had not seen before. This is Dave's Killer Bread. Hashtag not sponsored. So the reason I got this was because I was looking around the grocery store at Harris Teeter and seeing what kind of other options there were. I know bread is, again, like really problematic for a lot of people. I kind of just want to give you some guidelines here. So if you're going to eat bread, number one, we want whole wheat, whole grain bread. Okay? The less processed something is, the better it's going to be for you, the easier it is for you to break down. All right? All that processing affects our inside processing, right? And we talked about kind of forming that plaque and how much more your heart has to work to pump that blood. How much more does your body need to work to get the nutrients from the food, right? And if that food is severely processed, spoiler, there's not going to be a lot of nutrients in there to take, right? So that's kind of the whole thing behind whole foods, right? It's because it's easier for your body to break down to get the necessary nutrients from it to make you feel better, right? So this bread specifically, you can always go to the back, look at the ingredients label. So this is organic flour from wheat flour, whole wheat flour, barley flour, rye, spelt, millet, quinoa flour. All right, lots of different flours, all whole grain. All right, nothing that says enriched, nothing that says processed or bleached. Those are some kind of buzzwords we want to stay away from. All right, this has cane sugar, wheat gluten, yeast, and a little bit of salt, flour, vinegar, enzymes, stuff like that. Everything you can pronounce on the back of it is always a good thing to go for. Anything that has like a lot of chemicals, we want to try to avoid. So, other thing, high fructose corn syrup is usually a big thing in bread. That can what give it its sweetness. So white bread is a huge culprit of this. Is white bread is very, very sweet. It's literally in some countries, I had watched this video. The white bread from Subway is classified as a cake versus a bread. So that gives you an idea of how much sugar is in that. So I want to kind of look at what is in your bread. What is it made from? Can you pronounce it? Et cetera, et cetera. Everything works in a balanced diet, of course. I do want to make that disclaimer yet again. But checking kind of what else is in it. Okay, at the front, this sounds like, oh, really good. 6 grams of protein, no bleached flour, no fructose corn syrup. That sounds great. But don't just take the front of the packaging. It tells you everything that's in it. So read your nutrition label. We can do a whole little workshop if you want to learn more about how to read a nutrition label, what to look for. But typically with bread, like I said, try to avoid any of that enriched, bleached, processed, anything like that on the label. But also look for a good fiber count in terms of your total carbs. So fiber is really, really helpful for carbohydrates and kind of pushing everything through. We're going to go ahead and flip these over. Get some good color on those. They smell delicious, I'll tell you that. So cool. Bread's going, we talked about that. Meat's going, we talked about that. Let's talk about toppings real quick. So notice I don't have any cheese out here. People are like, oh, I can't have a burger without cheese. You can. It's just the fat from the cheese that you need with a little bit of the melty part. Sometimes good. So my go-to, some avocado, right? Call me new fashion. Call me a millennial. We're going to throw some avocado on here. So you know, as I talked about before, not all fat is bad. Not all fat is created equal. Look how beautiful that is. So avocado is a great choice. Excellent for that heart health. And we talked about kind of olive oil and coconut oil before. I know you still have some questions about that. We'll come back. Avocado, great option as a cheese substitute, at least in this thing. If you're making mac and cheese, I don't know if avocado and macaroni would be a great pairing. If you try it out, let me know how it goes. So I'm going to show you how to make a really quick guac. All right, all you guacamole perfectionists, this is just guac. It's not guacamole. So we're just going to mash an avocado up. We're going to put a little bit of salt. Quick things about salt, you know, I'm not about that processed table salt. It's all about that Himalayan pink salt or sea salt. A lot's better in terms of your nutrition, your hydration. So a little bit of salt in there. Sure, we'll put a little bit of pepper, a little crack or two. Lime, big star of the show. Oh, there's juice a whole lime in there. Ooh, this one's burned. And then that's pretty much going to be it for me. You can throw a little cilantro in there. You can throw a little bit of onion in there if you'd like. You can put the whole lime in there if you want. This is a pretty small lime, so we'll do the whole thing. But yeah, this is going to kind of give us that creamy richness. Additionally, with burgers, we do want to be on the lookout for all the different sauces that we put on the burger. So stuff like ketchup, lots of high fructose corn syrup, right? Mustard, it's a lot of extra salt. It's got some of that acidity, right? But again, highly processed. So do check on that if you choose to add additional sauces. Mayonnaise is another one. Mayonnaise, I have a big problem with mayonnaise. A lot of the mayonnaise uses a lot of bad oil. I did a Friday morning fuel, I don't know, end of summer, in the fall last year, about some sauces and different kinds of oils. We talked at length about olive oil, avocado oil, safflower, sunflower oil, all of that. So again, you can kind of go back and look at that. But basically, if anything is, like I said, any of those safflower, sunflower, cool, bread's done. So we're just gonna grab that. A little bit toasty, perfect. Pop that on the plate. We're almost there. We're almost there. So we'll give these a couple more minutes. I'm gonna turn my oven off. So yeah, just check it out with the oil. Go back and watch that video if you want to. What else goes on a burger? I don't like tomatoes. So I saw this little tip one time that was to use a red pepper. And ever since I learned that, I haven't looked back since. So we're gonna actually put a little bit more on that. So this kind of gives us that crunch, still pretty juicy on there as well. I'm gonna put my guac, it's really just a mashed avocado, on the top bun as well as the bottom bun. So that gives us a little bit of range, some juiciness, some flavor, some of that delicious fatty goodness on both ends. Of course, I do want to make the disclaimer, I'm not saying eat a burger every day, right? I'm showing you that it is simply possible to eat a heart-healthy burger should that celebration come up and you want to make some better choices. That's really what health is all about, right? It's just making the better choice. So we've got that going on. I am going to put a little bit of lettuce on, or this is spinach. We don't usually buy like lettuce. I like spinach. It's a little bit better nutritionally wise. It doesn't have, again, the same kind of crunch as like iceberg lettuce does, but it's got a lot of other benefits to offset that. So we're going to put a little bit of that spinach on there. If you want to put iceberg lettuce, I'm not telling you don't. It's just what I have in the fridge. All right, so these are done. We're going to, of course, grab the biggest one from there. What a beautiful looking burger. Oh my gosh. So we're going to put this. I've done some research as well on the proper burger order, and it does make a big difference in terms of how you stack it, in terms of like the structure of it, as well as that flavor profile we kind of talked about a bit. So, here we go. So, and now it's going to be time for some of our red onions. I'm going to try to use as little silverware as possible here. We're going to grab some of the deep bottom ones. So again, I would probably give this up to an hour or so, but you can see they've already started kind of turning a little bit. And we'll pop those on there. Bang, bang, boom. We'll stack that up. And wow, look at that. Boom, there's your heart-healthy burger. But last but not least, we need some sides, right? Big chips, big fries kind of fan. Boom. Tortilla chips. So I'm not saying don't eat your chips. We're going to talk about some heart-healthy options. So again, hashtag not sponsored. These are grain-free tortilla chips from Siete Foods. They're big in not using any grains, any processed stuff that we talked about. Also 100% avocado oil. So we talked about what kind of oils to use. There we go. Also, the tortilla chips are nice because you can use them on your guac. But yeah, just again, read the nutrition label, see what's in them. If you got a bunch of nasty oils, please don't use that. But there we go. I know we're right up to time, but there we go. You did it. You've got a full meal here, nice, well and balanced. I hope you enjoyed. Any other questions, as always, please let us know. Happy to be of service. Coach Matt here. Sign off. Friday Morning Fuel. We'll see you in March.